The global economic outlook is once again entering a phase of heightened uncertainty, driven by rising geopolitical tensions and tightening financial conditions. This is stated in a report by the International Monetary Fund. The report notes that while the shock from the war in the Middle East has not yet fully transmitted into the global economy, commodity prices continue to rise, production costs are increasing, supply chains are being disrupted, and purchasing power is weakening. It is argued that as companies and the labor force attempt to offset losses, inflationary pressures may intensify further. At the same time, tighter financial conditions are expected to dampen demand. In the near term, further increases in prices, rising inflation expectations, and continued monetary tightening throughout the year are considered likely. Under such a scenario, economic growth could fall to 2.5%, while inflation could rise to 5.4%. Around the Strait of Hormuz, major industrial facilities in several countries have come under attack, while others have been forced to scale back operations due to gas and raw material shortages. Meanwhile, the collapse of talks between the United States and Iran has further complicated the situation. Rising tensions over control of the Strait of Hormuz are also creating new economic risks.
In our real reference forecast, global debt reaches 99% by 2028, and this 100% mark before that we had in the previous editions. The second point I want to make is that risks are significant. Global debt at risk, that is a very technical way to look at debt that we define as the 95th percentile of projected debt distribution. So we're here thinking of not a point forecast, but a distribution of forecast. If we look at that, we see that at the 95th percentile, debt could reach 121% in 3 years' time.
Experts say that the issue of fuel shortages in Europe persists and warn that if the situation continues, air travel could face restrictions. According to estimates, European countries collectively have only around 6 weeks of aviation fuel reserves remaining. At present, the European political leadership is holding regular meetings to address two major challenges facing the continent. Europe is struggling with ongoing inflation and increasing difficulties in accessing gas, aviation fuel, diesel, and other critical resources. It is claimed that if the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened by May, it could lead to high inflation, weaker economic growth, and in some cases even push countries into recession. In such a scenario, companies could face continued layoffs, driving up unemployment. At the same time, lending is expected to slow down, consumption to decline, and both production and investment momentum to weaken.
Largest energy crisis we have ever faced in the history. It is a huge amount of oil, which is vital for the global economy, vital for transportation, for cars, for jets and everything. We lost huge amount of oil. Natural gas, which is also very important for generating electricity for our industries and others. We lost huge amount of natural gas. And on top of that, since the Strait of Hormuz was key for the certain vital commodities, such as the fertilizers.
According to analysts, countries in Asia, heavily dependent on energy imports from the Middle East and shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, are currently the most exposed to the ongoing disruptions. The impact is expected to spread to Europe and the United States in the next phase. It is also emphasized that further increases in petrol, gas, and electricity prices, along with potential shortages of certain oil products in global markets, are among the likely consequences of the turmoil. The shockwaves in energy markets have already become a serious test for global economic stability. According to data from China's National Bureau of Statistics, the initial instability in fuel supply earlier this year has been partially offset by a shift toward coal, wind, and solar energy. Official figures show that the country's economy grew by 5% compared to the same period last year, higher than both the previous quarter and market expectations. However, economists warn that amid rising global energy prices and weakening demand, China's export performance may decline. the International Monetary Fund projects that the country's overall economic growth could slow to 4.4%. In other words, while the Chinese economy is currently showing resilience, future developments will determine how sustainable this momentum remains.
The U.S. economy and the U.S. consumer overall is probably actually less sensitive to gas prices today than we were, say, 20 years ago or 40 years ago even. And that's partly because of the rise of things like remote work, more fuel-efficient cars, and also EVs.
It can therefore be concluded that if the current situation persists, not only price increases, but also a significant slowdown in global industrial production will become unavoidable. At the same time, although the ceasefire reached last week is still formally in place, tensions in the region have not been fully resolved. Any renewed escalation around the Strait of Hormuz could bring even deeper consequences for the global economy, with far-reaching and potentially destabilizing effects.